What do you think Carmine would say if I want to switch families? Come with you guys.
Carmine doesn't know who you are.
While the reason Johnny Sack gives for saying no is clearly not true, which we will get into in a bit, the answer no itself was firm. But why would New York not want to accept a big earner and top New Jersey captain like Ralph Cifaretto? Hey Sopranos fans, in this episode here on Bully Whispers, we will look into the possible reasons Johnny or Carmine would have had to turn Ralph down, including strategic interests, preventing problems with New Jersey, or even just Ralphie himself, and attempt to determine what their real rationale was. Of course, let me know what you think it was down in the comments section. Now, before digging in, there are two things to address regarding that encounter. First, it happened before Ralph made the joke about Ginny, so that clearly isn't part of the reason. And second, Johnny dismisses the idea immediately. He doesn't go to Carmine and come back. This means that any reasons would be Johnny's, and the only real way Carmine would be connected to it is if Johnny was telling the truth and Carmine really didn't know who he was, so let's start there. While some may point to how Carmine didn't know Paulie as reason enough to believe he wouldn't know Ralph, I think enough has been done on why Carmine didn't acknowledge knowing him. Instead, we will take a second to look at how Carmine's style, along with Ralphie's position, make it unlikely that Carmine wasn't keenly aware of who he was before moving on to all of the reasons Johnny Sack may have had for turning him down. Now, the first time we really see Carmine is at the celebration party for some recently made New Jersey guys like Christopher, and while there may be some potential ulterior motives, which I cover in Carmine's Machiavellian Monday, the only things we hear them talk about are a general acknowledgement that the Esplanade was starting, Tony's panic attacks, and his therapy. None of these in and of itself would be reason enough for someone like Carmine to attend a party for lowly New Jersey soldiers. A general acknowledgement that the project was starting would be completely unnecessary, and that's not the type of venue Carmine would have used to engage in serious business talks. The fact that Tony was neither shocked nor fazed by his presence suggests this may not be the first time he attended one, which would make sense since Carmine's the kind of guy who keeps an ear to the ground. We also know that Carmine is all about business, as he turned down John's request to kill Ralphie after the Ginny joke.
We depend on this guy. There are millions of dollars at stake. We can't afford it, John.
And doubled down on it during the sit-down with New Jersey.
There are millions of dollars at stake.
Again with the money?
Yeah, again with the money. It's settled, John. So either name a price or get the fuck over it.
Due to Ralph's position and the amount of money running through him. So when you take into account the fact that Carmine makes it his business to know New Jersey business, is primarily interested in money, and the majority of money coming from New Jersey goes through Ralphie, it's almost a guarantee that Carmine not only knew who he was, but had looked into him as well. Of course, there is the possibility that that sort of thing wasn't done, but if you look at real life, even though it's far more common among associates than made men, there are still examples of it happening. So what could Johnny Sack's personal reasons have been? The first one that comes to mind is that, through things such as moving to New Jersey and cultivating relationships with the Capos, Johnny shows a tremendous interest in sticking his beak in despite his claims to the contrary.
You should have fucking told me.
Oh, Tony, I'm telling you now. This is strictly a place for me to live. I got no intention of sticking my beak in.
And if Ralphie joined New York, he would no longer be privy to the sort of inside information that Johnny wants from him, but here's the thing. John still had his residence in New Jersey and was in control of construction on the New York side, which means he would still be in prime position to do the same thing with whoever ran construction on the Jersey side. In that sense, while his intel on New Jersey may slow a bit temporarily, he would have no problem replacing it and would have potentially gained an earner in the long run. So perhaps John's reasoning for not wanting Ralph has more to do with not wanting to upset relations with New Jersey.
But New York and Sopranos have long-standing ties, and that's not going to change.
Which would be understandable since poaching a top capo would not only be a huge deal, but also a clear indicator that Johnny was sticking his beak in. However, Tony hated Ralph, Tony wanted Ralph dead, and John knew it. If he had actually approached Tony about taking Ralph, it might not have been a big deal. Sure, Tony would have acted like it was, and probably asked for a lot in compensation, but he never really wanted Ralph, so if John did, something probably could have been worked out. Perhaps then, John's problem lies with Ralphie himself, as he certainly does bring quite a few of them to the table. First, he's from New Jersey, which we see throughout the show isn't as respected by the New York guys.
Now, you gotta give him some slack. He hasn't really been boss of a family very long.
Family? I told you. They're a glorified crew.
So there is the possibility that John's concern was that his crew's immediate lack of respect for Ralph, combined with Ralph's abrasive personality, could lead to some hostilities. However, conflict between capos is common within families, and that wouldn't stop a family like the Lupertazzis from making it work, especially with an earner. So that may play into it, but it's probably not enough on its own to sink the transfer. Of course, Ralphie's coke habit certainly didn't help.
It was the fucking coke. I should have never started with that shit.
But it's important to note here that unlike Big Pussy or Richie, he was never accused of being involved in moving it. And while Ralph's use may be a bit much, as someone who would have come of age during the 1970s and 80s, Johnny was probably fairly used to gangsters doing coke. Either way, it's something John would have tolerated for the same reason that Tony did for so long. Ralph was an earner, but that's where the real issue may lie in his move to New York. Would he still be a good earner there? From what we see, his two biggest sources of income are real estate scams and construction, and he only got into real estate because he was lucky enough to be eating with Tony when Brian brought it up. With construction, again, he only got it because of Tony, and it's not like he's still going to be in charge of the New Jersey side of things if he were to go over to New York. Moreover, there's no way he would be put in charge of the New York side either, even if John became boss and took a step back. There would be too many people before him lined up for the spot. On top of that, a lot of his New Jersey connections would stop working with him, so the one positive thing that he brought to the table, his income, would be completely jeopardized due to the move. This means he would essentially be just another unrespected cokehead gangster trying to scratch a living in a crowded New York mob scene against much tougher competition than he's used to. This would be completely and utterly useless for Johnny Sack.
All right, kiddies, that's enough for tonight.
Well, thanks for watching this episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.